So there is this recent crackdown of the homeless encampments in Echo Park. And it began with LAPD, and they moved in, and there were some protesters that clashed with law enforcement. And it's not only in Echo Park, it's also in MacArthur Park, where there is a large number of homeless encampments. And I'm basically showing you images around MacArthur Park if you are familiar with closer to the downtown of Los Angeles area. And so this is what you'll basically see in MacArthur Park area. You'll see a lot of homelessness. And so the homelessness is really, gotten really bad over the years. And I've noticed, I'm bringing it back to MacArthur Park. This is basically most of Los Angeles, what you're seeing. And so I wanted to talk about this for a moment because the crackdown really, this is what was saw or was what people saw during the protests. Standing up, basically, some people were probably protesters and activists that were standing up for people in those communities. So this our authorities on Wednesday night moved in to close down these homeless encampments. This was in Echo Park area. And it has become a highly charged test of a city's leaders' struggle to balance constituents' demand to clean the streets, public spaces with the ever-growing tragedy of people who have no homes, places to live. So scores of people moved in to the area where they were met by more than 200 protesters who opposed this sweep. So LA Police Department repeatedly told the protesters to leave. And this was early on a Thursday morning, and the crowd dwindled, and then the protest mostly wound down. But before 10 p.m., the park rangers, flanked by LAPD officers, began taping the notices of closures on trees and light poles on the east side of the park where homeless people had been camping throughout the COVID pandemic. And so the signs basically said that the park wasn't going to close. So on Thursday, they gave notices to all the personal property that must be removed from the park, including but not limited to the tents, chairs, tables, backpacks, bags, personal items, and what have you. So the city contractors, protected by LAPD officers, unloaded fence from a flatbed truck and floodlights to help guide their work as they pounded the panels in the fence into the ground. Once it was up, the workers unfurled green fabric so it hung over these fences. And so LAPD Chief Michael Moore said homeless residents inside the park will be allowed to stay overnight, but that no one else could enter, and the encampment residents must leave within 24 hours. So some protesters saw that the statement was a victory and we won that night. But this is what one organizer had shouted, so they were able to at least stay that one time. But I live here and I consider tonight a victory, and added one resident of the camp. And so police just before 10:30 gave the dispersal order to the crowd on a loudspeaker from a white truck, officially declaring an unlawful assembly. So there were some clashes with the police, seen shoving some protesters and some bottles and other objects that were thrown at the officers. So police tried to push protesters back from the park, but they refused to move. At one point, a line of police officers in riot gear moved slowly along Glendale Boulevard at the edge of the lake, telling protesters to clear this area. So the protesters, a mix of homeless people and activists who have taken up a cause, refused to budge and chanted back, "Whose park? Our park. Whose park? Our park." So the crowd began chanting, "Why are you in riot gear? I don't see no riot here." So at around 12:30 a.m., the number of protesters dwindled to about 40, watched over by several hundred police officers, and some residents of the encampment were saying they would not leave, but others decided it was time to go. So Edward Juarez dismantled a tent on the east side of the park as dozens of officers massed across the street and park rangers accompanied the police, and he taped signs to the trees, said Juarez, and others who lived in the park had to clear out before 10:30 p.m. on Thursday. And so Juarez, who has lived in the park since August, said the tent belonged to a friend who he placed last week at a hotel in the downtown Los Angeles. So Juarez, professional photographer who had said that he had lost his livelihood when the pandemic shut down concerts and other nightlife events that he worked at, he said that he planned to stay the night somewhere else, maybe on Alvarado Street or at a friend's house. And so a lot of people are homeless. I'm not going to play the videos. There are several videos that show the pushing crowd, the protesters on the Glendale side, and some of the things that had took place. And so you can look at it at your leisure, but I just want to get out of here. It's crazy, or getting crazy, he said, nodding towards the officers wearing helmets and carrying batons across the street. Juarez said police officers came to the park last week and said the city planned to clear the park, although they didn't tell him when the sweep would happen. And so it is what it is. It is what it is, he said. But what else are you going to do? So LA City Councilman Mitch O'Farrell said LAPD was asked to support the community's safety efforts during an installation of the fence to assist the rehabilitation of Echo Park. Okay, and so department personnel are deployed in that area so that those efforts can begin in a safe, unimpeded manner. So he added that the homeless services provider would be back in the park Thursday to work with the park's unhoused residents to offer shelter and service to anyone who wants and needs the assistance. It sounds good when you're looking at it here, but it isn't as easy as it seems because everybody's situation is a case by case situation. And so the SELAH Neighborhood Homeless Coalition late Wednesday demanded the closure to be postponed so residents have the necessary time and meaningfully connect with services providers who were working tirelessly to serve them, so they could place these people in some kind of place to stay so they wouldn't just be totally displaced. So as protests erupted on the west side of the park, senior officials with the LA Homeless Service Authority moved through the park dimly lit and dead quiet eastern part. They sought out 30 to 50 homeless people they estimated remained there. Okay, so they found one couple who jumped at the opportunity to go to the downtown hotel and quickly called them a lift. And so some people wanted to get out of there, and while there were others, there really wasn't any other place that they really wanted to be except where they were. So let's meet at their tent. So we have to figure out what to do with their stuff. So this was LAHSA Executive Director Heidi Marston said to one of her colleagues as they waited for them to depart. So Marston was frustrated and concerned with how the park's closure had been rolled out and communicated to homeless people. They need more time, ample warning time, before something like this could take place, she said. And so, just so they could get their stuff together. So this is when the work crews installed the fences around Echo Park on Wednesday night. And so basically they were pretty much enclosing this place off so nobody can sleep there. So it's about setting expectations and being clear and giving them options. So Marston said, so that wasn't possible here, she said. The couple, they got to a hotel where the only people who wanted to go tonight, and she hoped more would go on Thursday. So if you're gonna close the park, be clear about it. So it doesn't mean that we need to take people by surprise, she said. It facilitates fear, chaos, and it breaks the trust that is built. And so it seems like it didn't need to happen in this way. So the LAPD issued a statement urging calm and cooperation as the installation of the fence in support of Echo Park's rehabilitation effort continues. So unfortunately, officers have received projectiles refusals from individuals blocking the streets in the area, and the department denied claims from some that officers used tear gas on the people. And so let me stop there. They said they denied the claims that officers used tear gas. Okay, I'm panning up. I don't know if you see what I see, but it looks pretty foggy right there in that clip right there. And it says a protester set off, okay, so smoke projectile as LAPD chanted leave the area. So they say a protester did it. So I'm wondering, was the protester that did it for sure, or was it police officers? They said they didn't have any tear gas, but I'm not sure about that. I didn't play the clip. You could play the clip if you want to. So, it didn't look like people were very happy. So, anyway, I wouldn't be happy. So, those are the notices that went out. And you could see it here. A group of officers are slowly moving towards the crowd on Glendale, shouting, "Move and clear the area." So, this is what you've seen. In Echo Park, some residents of the camp have agreed to go, but others were vowing to stay, resist eviction. And they argued that the park, nestled in a small canyon with the breathtaking view of downtown skyline, has been elevated by homeless residents and their allies as a place of beauty that gives those living there the dignity and safety that they could not find on sidewalks under freeways. So park residents and their advocates who held a protest Wednesday morning argued that they have turned the encampment into a model with a pantry, a garden, and some effort among residents to cooperate cleaning or coordinate the cleaning. So the park could have easily been MacArthur Park or Skid Row. Okay. Speaking of MacArthur Park, resident Ayaman Ahmed told O'Farrell the 20-something Ahmed has been or become an unofficial spokesperson for the encampment, but the camp has drawn an irie that is of neighbors. So the city leaders argue that they are not simply pushing out people out, but are offering them better accommodations rather than them staying in the park. So you define a sweep as moving someone indoors to a safe, clean environment where they will be provided food, free, healthy meals, receive medical care, and a path to wellness. Then you can call it what you want, O'Farrell said later in the day. But because this is what we are doing for everyone who has been there over the last several weeks or months, that is. So as the encampment grew last year to about 200 tents and covered nearly half the park, many residents surrounding Hillside demanded that the O'Farrell do something about the intrusion of trash, drug use, crime, and the neighborhood which he represents. So we refuse to be swept into the dark corners. So they were having 200 tents that were there constantly. So O'Farrell has long said that he would close the park and repair any damage, but he resisted requests from public comment to the timetable. So while outreach workers have been telling people in the park for weeks that they would eventually have to leave, the decision to act this week remained a tight secret until it leaked through unidentified sources to the Time and activists supporting the homeless encampment. So the activist said O'Farrell hoped to keep the date quiet to avoid backlash, and that he obtained opinion from the city attorney Mike Fear that only 24-hour notice would be required to enforce 10:30 park curfew. So Führer, his office, said it provided advice but would not say what the advice was. The campers and their advocates began a vigil Wednesday, anticipating that police would arrive at night or early in the morning to begin ticketing people. So, for the second consecutive day, volunteers in groups like the Street Watch and workers from nonprofits such as the Urban Alchemy and Path circulated the park, recruiting campers to get on shuttle buses, making the short trip downtown to the three hotels at undisclosed locations. So, somewhat complicating matters on Wednesday, outreach workers from the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority were not allowed to enter the park. So, it's for the safety of our teams. So, we worried about the protests, said an LAHSA spokesperson, Christopher Lee. And so, don't evict my neighbor. You see this here. So, leaders among those who declined the shelter said that they expect 20 or 50 people to defend what they believe is their right to live in a public park. So, as tensions are expected sweep built during the week, Mayor Eric Garcetti took the backseat to the councilman from the former district, issuing a statement Tuesday that he was working on O'Farrell to ensure that all people in the park were offered appropriate housing and shelter and are given the opportunity to claim the store and store their property. More than 150 homeless people and activists amassed in the park 7 a.m. Wednesday to castigate the planned closure. So, homeless people have been camping in the park as late since 2019, but their numbers have grown substantially during this pandemic that we've been going through. Since the news of the park closure broke, O'Farrell's office has been flooded with a lot of angry calls and emails. So in the park encampment, residents mingled with the community and decried the city's response to homelessness right writ large. Okay, so the group marched to O'Farrell's district office on Sunset Boulevard, a block away, where Ahmad argued that since the parks are public land, they should be used for public good. So he criticized the secrecy that accompanied the planned closure and informed people that they be staying the night. And so whoever can be here, please sleep over, he said. So we need to tell Mitch this got to stop. So once the speakers were finished, the group marched back to the park and planned to paper it with signs as they waited for authorities to arrive. So the city is offering to move people from the encampment to hotel rooms, and it is renting temporarily under a state program project called Room Key, is what the project is called. So Ahmed spoke of it in dark terms, claiming without evidence that it was lining the pockets of elected officials and wasn't helping people who needed it the most. And so he said the closure of the park would only add to the problems of the people who have been staying there. So Ahmad Chapman, a spokesman for the Homeless Service Agency, said that on Monday and Tuesday, outreach workers from the organization moved 44 people from the lake into these hotels. So throughout the morning, Wednesday's buses ferried people to the downtown hotel, ultimately taking 15 to 20 former park residents. And so homeless service workers have quietly expressed frustration about speed and the secrecy of the cleanup and closure plan, and they have said it makes it harder to help their clients. Several people phoned the city council meeting Wednesday to rail against the closure plan, including protesters dialing from the Echo Park demonstration as well. And so, Mitch, if you continue down this path to sweep and displace unhoused residents in Echo Park Lake, there's going to be an escalation that you are not prepared for, warned Richie Sergenko, of an activist group, People's City Council, which has repeatedly staged protests outside of homes of council members. So Ahmed urged O'Farrell to work with the residents, arguing that they had worked to throw away trash and clean the area. And at the end of the meeting, O'Farrell complained that there had been a concentrated and coordinated effort to spread disinformation and disrupt efforts to get people into housing. So the councilman said there had been months of effort to build relationship with people living in the park and get them into housing ahead of the temporary necessary closures of the park facility so the crews can begin extensive repairs of the park. So he denounced the idea of the encampment was somehow utopian or a commune like, citing a phrase in the Times article. The park has, in fact, evolved into a dangerous, chaotic environment for all users, O'Farrell said, noting that there had been 4 deaths in that park. So some at the park welcomed the prospect of a hotel room. Slumped on the sidewalk of the street just north of the park, Clifford French, who had been staying in the park for about 4 months, said he was excited to get a room. So after arriving from Nevada and riding a bus and walking the streets for a week, he came to the lake after a friend told him it was a safe place to stay temporarily. So 41-year-old said homelessness the 41-year-old, he said, it quickly becomes a surviving rather than thriving. And so the simple acts of keeping clean, staying fed, consumed his time. French looked forward to a bed and being able to take a shower again, and he hoped this ability might give him the chance to look for a job or sign up for a benefit. But still, he wondered about the people who weren't lucky enough to get a room. So the park was a nice place to stay. I love the sun, the fountain, and the people, he said. It's hard to know where these people will go. And so that's basically, it's a lengthy article. I'm sorry for that. And so I think I even skipped it. I went right here and I just kind of skipped over it because it was pretty lengthy. I didn't want to go. I actually read it to its entirety, but look at this here. This is what's going on. The reason why I'm going over this is because this park has had a lot of more homeless. It's grown over the years that I've seen it. MacArthur Park, Echo Park, and I showed you MacArthur Park how it looks, didn't I? And this is what MacArthur Park looks like. It's just, actually that right there is by the freeway, but yeah, it has gotten, really bad. This is basically most of Los Angeles. And MacArthur Park, there's a lot of, they got these porta potties out there, but what good that does when you got all these homeless people out there, all over the place and living in squalor. And so it's really, really a sad thing to see. But what I was going to add is this pandemic, it's got more and more people that are getting evicted. And every week, I kid you not, I'm seeing more furniture set out on the curb. It's like every week there's a new batch of furniture set out on the curb. Now, to bring it to what's going on, you got this homeless thing that's already been happening. It's growing exponentially, I'll say that. And over the years, it has been. And now you have not only that, the clash with Echo Park, what happened there, and how these people, they're trying to basically, you hear what they said? It was a sweep. Crackdown at Echo Park homeless encampment begins. The LAPD moves in, clashes with protesters, and so this is what was going on. And so for those of you that maybe if you didn't know or you're not familiar with this area, LA over the years, the homelessness has grown and grown. Skid Row is not the only place that you see homelessness. It has grown. It's sprawled out now all over, and it's getting worse. And it is even going to get worse because of this pandemic. And the rent relief program has helped some, while it has others that are in limbo or almost out the door. with no place to stay. They're going to have to double up with family members and friends, or they're going to have to find other places that are going to be like temporary stays if it's hotels, or maybe they're going to have to be creative to some degree, and then some may wind up like these people totally on the street, or maybe living from house to house, or couch surfing, as they say, if you would. And so it has gotten really bad, and I've been seeing it on my block in the West LA area, or South LA area, um, most of unincorporated South LA. There has been large swaths of evictions. And so I'm just basically saying this. Now, there's a rent relief program in some places, but you'd had to qualify. You'd had to pay from the time the pandemic happened. You'd had to pay at least from the time the pandemic happened to now, at least a quarter of what was owed in back rent to somewhat have some stability or safety net to uh, keep you in your apartment or where you're staying. If you or somebody, like some people, these are the things that I've heard some people, neighbors, things that have said when they saw rent relief, um, uh, rent freeze. We don't have to pay any rent. I'm just gonna stop paying my rent. And some people, out of naivety, they saw the headlines say rent freeze or forgive the rent. And what they didn't do is they didn't read those articles to find out, or read it, even if it wasn't articles, like read the rules of what rent freeze meant or moratorium meant. They assume that it means just don't pay. And when they got too far behind, and they got into a clash with their landlord, they refused. You had some that were refusing to pay because they got too far behind and they couldn't catch up. Some people lost their jobs and they couldn't pay because they lost their jobs, not because they refused to pay, because their circumstance caused them to lose their jobs. Now, some declarations were printable where you could maybe go and print out, or if somebody is savvy or has a printer, you could print out a declaration, or Xerox one, and I guess you had a certain numbers of days at the beginning of a month to give it to your landlord, letting them know you're still going through job loss or income loss. Basically keeping the line of communication open with your landlord, letting them know that you have intentions of paying the rent. You'll pay what you can. Some people can pay a little bit, some people can pay a little more, but you can't pay the full amount, or you're not really sure that jobs are stable. Now, some people's jobs, maybe they didn't lose their job, they were laid off. Their job closed because of the COVID scare, and they didn't want a lot of people being in the same room, and they're not 6 feet or 3 feet apart, and they could expose kids or themselves or customers or wherever you work, just random people with whatever illness or catch illness. A lot of people weren't vaccinated, and they were still steady trying to roll out the vaccination efforts. And so a lot of this has affected so many families that I see every week. Literally, there's sofas, beds, clothes, people just moving left and right. This is like each week there's a new batch of people moving furniture. It's so bad. It's so bad that every week you could expect somebody to be evicted. Um, or either displaced. And so most of the people that this is happening to in South LA are Hispanic or Black families. And this is the sad reality that we are living in. And so people literally are hinging on that unemployment check, or they're literally waiting for their benefit checks or services that are helpmeets for the time being because of what's going on. It has gotten so bad. Now, that's why you see protests happening in all of these places where they're trying to sweep homelessness away. I saw an article that said we should decolonize these places and give people affordable housing. The more you see people that you have all these workers that are, most of them do essential jobs, the pay is not enough to pay 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 a month. If you've seen in the cities how these apartments, how they price them, it is ridiculous. Not only renters are getting displaced, I'm hearing that the housing market is in trouble. They don't talk more about it, but we're going to see something, I fear, in this year, and it's going to be mass homelessness like you never seen before. And a lot of it is the blame of this crisis, this pandemic crisis. And I feel like if they lowered the rents, if they made apartments more affordable, you wouldn't see so many people on the street like you do. I feel like that's simple. But, people are money hungry, they're greedy, and they want market rate rent, but you're not making market rate income. And so you're working at these places, and you know, I don't know if I'm moving away from the issue or staying on the issue, but I feel like all of this is connected. Recently, I saw where Amazon workers were fighting to unionize. They can't even take a bathroom break without worrying about losing time or getting fired of their job. You hear you got a man, he's past trillionaire status. He's got money. He could basically end a lot of some of this and help a lot of these people. But if you get jobs in those areas, your job is, you're expendable. And so if you're not able to stand a long time, or you're not able to be fast, or if you take a long time to go to the bathroom, to walk to the bathroom, you're taking too much of your TOT time, and you have a rate job, and so you might get fired because you walked too long to walk to the bathroom. I'm hearing that's how Amazon sort of operates in that fashion, where the workers are afraid that if they work in these long big warehouses where there's a lot long space to walk, because they have all these items they're bestowed, that if they go to the bathroom, it's, that they can lose their job. And so these are the things that some of the people who are working at home, or they have maybe a lifestyle where they live in an upper echelon financial situation where they are not worried about being displaced. They can sell homes, buy homes, move to another home, move to another city, and disappear and go into hiding and live in silence. But your silence is your violence and is acceptance of watching others suffer, and you benefit from it. because you're not helping anyone. And that's what I see. I feel like we're coming into a time where there's a war on the poor. That's what's going on, a war on the poor. And it's wrong. And the more you displace people, the more you make housing unaffordable, is the more you're going to see these clashes with police. The more you're going to see protesters and people speaking out about the unfair treatment that people are getting and how unfair it is to make it so that people and families don't have anywhere to stay. So this is pretty much how I'm going to end it. You know, MacArthur Park, Echo Park have a long history. There have been many protests in Echo Park and MacArthur Park and events, and so there are going to be a lot of other protests that are going to come out, and a lot of this is all based on how people are faring through this pandemic. It has really shattered a lot of lives. So I'm gonna let this video go, but I think a lot of people should really think about all this, because I feel like you think 2020 was bad. I think we're just at the beginning of what bad really is, or worse.